Hello, parents. This is Arundel County Public Schools, and you're listening to the Maryland Crabs Podcast.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
Welcome to the Maryland Crabs. La 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 la.
God, you're killing me, Smells.
I feel festive.
You look festive in your black sweater.
I have not started shopping yet, and here's the thing I was just telling someone earlier. It wasn't that I put it off. I absolutely completely forgot. I'm not kidding. It was my wife last night, and she looked at me and she goes, I got you something good. And I went, holy shit. I had completely gone off my radar, and here we are, like literally 4 days away.
Christmas is rolled up on me again as well. Last weekend, I had all sorts of things planned with Teresa, and I'm like, I'm going to take a pass on a lot of this. And I remember on Saturday night.
Best boyfriend ever.
I turned around and I made a checklist of everything I needed to do this week. I mean, it was like, okay, wrap my dad's present, get it sent out, bank accounts, this. So I'm doing okay.
And the problem is, and this is, I think we're all facing this. I went to Amazon to buy her a lot of the stuff last night. And as I'm browsing for her, I'm seeing all the stuff that she had previously viewed. So like now we know what each other's getting for the most part. I'm like, well, you know what? Why don't we just buy our own stuff and just set a limit? Just take, it's pretty much, we both know what we're getting each other at this point because Amazon's stupid.
That's true. I didn't think about that when you guys share the
when you share an account, right? Yeah. So I'm bringing it up and they're going, well, since you viewed this, I'm like, oh, I don't want that, but I better tell her now.
That's funny. That is funny.
So interesting. So Chris Valerio, she is running Ignite Annapolis. She's one of the people who are running Ignite Annapolis, and I'm afraid I don't know the other people.
And Ignite is cool.
It is really cool. So what Ignite is
TED Light.
It's like TED. I went last February, and basically they're looking for people to submit. And what it is you get, I think, 20 slides and 5 minutes. And the slides are on a timer. So you have to keep up with the slides. So if you fall off your topic, you're kind of screwed because you got to catch up. And everyone did great last year. And that was the first time that I saw Gavin speak in public. So he announced on our podcast like in November, something like that, or he made forays that he was going to do it. And then a month later, he was doing the Ignite thing, and he winged it, by the way.
Yes, but he wings everything, it seems.
Yeah, but it was really interesting. You can pick any topic you want, pretty much. I mean, I think you can do Loch Ness Monster if you want. You can do
it's anything.
Bees.
You can do thought-provoking. It could be shocking. It could be just silliness. It could be almost anything.
Yeah, some were not my speed. I was kind of like, all right, well, I only got 5 minutes of it. And then some were just fascinating. I wish I had more. Some were really polished. I think two young women did them together. And I'm trying to remember what the topic was, and it was just absolutely amazing.
I think that was a racial thing.
It was really, really good. And I think they were college students, and it was fantastic. But it was standing room only. So
you can go to a website.
It's at Maryland Hall.
You can go to the website igniteannapolis.com,
right.
And you can look at some of the old ones,
right?
And they're pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and so if you want to do it, and I would encourage you to do it, take a look at it, and seriously, just wing it. You're not being graded, you're not getting paid. It's it's just a lot of fun to do. And if you hose it, who cares? Everyone in there is very forgiving. And it was standing room only last year. I waited too long, like I did with my Christmas shopping, and Chris is like, I have a ticket for you, but you got to stand in the back. So that was fine. It was really amazing. But if you want to do it, you have to submit your idea proposal. Go to igniteannapolis.com, and there's a link there for your proposal, but it's due by December 29th, and you'll be notified by January 19th.
And then your slides are due like February 1st.
Yeah.
In February, but it's IGNITE, Annapolis.
I might do it, but I don't know what to do.
You could do it about podcasting.
I don't know anything about podcasting.
Yeah, apparently, if you have listened to the episode with Rock Taze, you listen to the editing.
Yeah, we had a problem. He was a little back from the mic. I texted John in a panic, and he just promptly ignored me, as he always does when I panic, which is most of the time.
Well, there's nothing you can do.
See, I don't have that Zen sort of
control it as you move. So, and we did mention that we're on Spotify now, which is like very cool, and we're getting lots of traffic off of Spotify. I looked at that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
See, I don't look at the stats.
So that's we got about 103 listens off of Spotify over our first 2 weeks. So I'm happy about that. Huh. I'm happy about that. So if you're on Spotify, you can just search for the Maryland Crabs.
Yeah, wherever else too.
Is there anywhere?
YouTube and Alexa and
anywhere
all those
else.
Places.
We're not sure what we're going to do next week.
Yeah, we were just talking about that before we hit the record. We got two options. One
we can do, and the other one is like sort of like a year-end, just
wrap up
bullshit kind of a thing. We did it at Sammy's last year. You said,
yeah, we did it kind of last minute. It worked out. As a matter of fact, that was one of our biggest episodes. Much to my astonishment.
Episodes are surprising.
You people are fickle. We haven't figured you guys out yet.
That's true.
Some things I think we're going to blow the doors off the hinges, and we're like, okay, it's a pretty good episode. And some I'm like, that sucked, and everyone loves it.
Well, this week we've got a voice that is known to most everybody.
And it is a voice that most everyone loves to hear. My kids love his voice.
Right. Parents, not so much.
No.
Not so much. So, without further ado, why don't we just get right into it?
Hey, America, we need to have a little talk. We've got more food than we know what to do with in this country, yet 17 million kids in America are struggling with hunger. Makes no sense. Luckily, the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks has volunteers gathering excess food and getting it to hungry kids. They're kind of like food angels. Hey, become a food angel yourself by supporting Feeding America in your local food bank at feedingamerica.org. We can't do it without your help. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Whether it's Main Street, your street, or any street in the county that we all live in and love and call Arundel, it's a special place. But part of living here is having a bank that provides what you need when you need it. So when your plans and dreams call for a bank, turn to us, your neighbor. We're Severn Bank, supporting the community that supports us. I'm Alan Hyatt, chairman of Severn Bank, and it's our honor to be the bank that serves the people of Anne Arundel County. One thing that we never forget is that as a member of this community, it's our responsibility to be committed to helping you and our county thrive. Like you, we live here, we work here, and we play here. Severn Bank, we're here with you.
Online at severnbank.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender. Severn Bank is a trade name used by Severn Savings Bank.
We are here from the Commons on beautiful West Street in a crisp December morning. No snow in the forecast, but we have a living local meme with us today. And we have Anne Arundel County School District and Anne Arundel County Public Schools spokesperson Bob Mosier. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks for letting me be here.
Well, thank you for coming out. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, we've talked to any number of, we'll say, government officials and levels of government. And while the school district is not really a government per se, or a branch, I guess it's a department of, but you're really autonomous. And we just sort of wanted to get some, just some insight from your point of view on how the school district runs, what your job entails, and everything else. And I appreciate you coming in, and I'm glad we didn't have a snow day there. You'd have to be
that makes two of us
shuttling buses or whatever it may be. But I mean, how did you fall into this job? I mean, what's your background?
So I grew up in Annapolis. Went to Annapolis High School. Went to the University of Maryland, and
it was Annapolis High School at the time?
Right. Okay. So my class, I graduated in '82. So we were the first class to go fully through the current building.
Okay. So you came in ninth grade?
Right. We were never in the old building. 10th grade, because then ninth grade we're still in junior high schools. So I went to the University of Maryland, left there with a journalism degree, worked 6 months on the Eastern Shore in Cambridge at a paper called the Daily Banner, a really small 5-day-a-week paper. Then came to the Maryland Gazette doing sports still. Moved to the Capitol, spent 5 years there doing sports. Then I moved to news, then spent 12 years as editor of the Maryland Gazette. And then this job came open and I applied for it, and I've been here 11 years.
How long have you been in as a spokesperson? Who did you come in?
This is my 11th year.
So who was the superintendent back then? That was
Kevin Maxwell. It was Dr. Maxwell. I came in October of 2006, and he got here in July of 2006.
No, Maxwell? Mm-hmm. So you weren't here during Eric Smith?
No.
Oh, really? Okay.
I see so many people who cut their chops in journalism that, it's an exciting sort of thing. I mean, I used to work in news too, and the adrenaline and just kind of the news cycle. And then after about 5-10 years, you're like, nights and weekends and holidays, this is great.
It was interesting. I mean, I wasn't looking to leave. I did sports for 6 years, and then I did copy editing and page design, and then I did, I was editor of the Gazette for 12 years, and had a daughter who was young at the time. And, we had encountered some frustrations at the paper with trying to cover some stories at the school system.
Right.
And stories that we thought were positive stories. And
frustration how?
Frustration in access and those kinds of things.
You just weren't getting the information that you wanted.
And it was the famous story I tell everybody is we had a feature called Teen of the Week. As a twice weekly paper at the Gazette, it's mostly positive news. It's a community newspaper, and so we had a feature called Teen of the Week, and these are kids who don't necessarily get in the paper for anything else.
Right.
They're not the star athletes, they're not the valedictorians, but these are kids with really cool stories. And there was a musician, and we wanted to get a picture to go with the story, and we went through all kinds of roadblocks. We couldn't take pictures at rehearsal, we couldn't take pictures during the performance, we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that, and we ended up with a picture. She was a clarinet player. We ended up with a picture of her in her school uniform outside the school, just standing there holding her clarinet. I said, that's just not, doesn't seem right. And so when this opportunity came up, I thought it a bit hypocritical to have complained about that kind of stuff and not at least see if there was something I could do to try to help fix that.
Yeah, well, I think that being on that side, like right now especially, you see journalists taking a lot of heat, and which, I think people like you and I who had a background in it kind of resent, and John, who currently does it, kind of resents because you know what a hard job it is. Yeah, but you have a unique perspective when you come in. You can say, like, this is the information that we want, and this is the way I want to portray it, so I can make it easier.
Yeah, it's well. So first of all, the journalism that I left 11 years ago isn't the journalism that exists today. This industry has changed so much. Online. Just the fact that we're sitting here doing this, right?
That's true.
Is one piece of evidence of it. But for me, and I think for a lot of journalists who jump the fence, so to speak, right? You do have a perspective of, here are the questions these folks are going to ask. Here are the information. Right. Here's the information that they want. So let's not put up roadblocks. Let's figure out a way to be able to tell our story and be able to give them what it is they want.
But conversely, you see the other side of it, where
I do.
Where all of a sudden you're like, all right, this is information that I've really got to hold back, or that they want that I've got to put up that, well, we have no comment at this time, and that's got to be frustrating for you to have to say that.
And I say to reporters all the time, I give you a lot of credit for asking that question.
Right. But now with 11 years under your belt as on the other side of the fence, do you find the need to hold back and withhold this, the other things? You've known that you need to give. As a reporter, you knew what you needed to want, or you knew what you wanted.
Right.
And now you're on the other side. And I know we've gone back and forth a couple times where there's information that I have, and I'm looking for a comment. And you're trying to put the school obviously in the best light. And I think that's probably your chief job.
Well, it is, but communicating information is really my chief job. And I've always sort of taken a bit of exception to the term spinning, right? And when you talk about news, what I've tried to do and what our team has tried to do, and I've been really fortunate. We've changed one person in 11 years on my team. And so I have to tell you, they're just great people to work with. But we want to give people the information that they're entitled to and that they want. There's certain things that we're prevented from releasing, right? And you and I have had these conversations over the years. Student names in certain things, specific discipline sanctions, those kinds of things. But I think if you can develop relationships, there are ways to sort of strike a compromise where you can get most of what you're looking for, and I'm not violating the law, and we're okay.
I know, just an example. I know that we went back and forth one time. There was an incident at a school where a kid was flown out on a helicopter after he gotten beat up, and I made the critical error of calling it an assault, which is what the police determined it, but the school district was hell-bent on calling it an altercation. Right. And it was just,
I got the emails from John, the frustrated emails.
And that was...
so did I.
And that obviously...
Do you ignore him too? I don't pay attention to him.
That was obviously your position of putting the school in the best light as possible in a challenging circumstance.
The issue in that case was that assault is a specific charge with the school system. It's also a specific charge with police, but they're different, right? And so that's the issue there, right? Okay. And so we had, you're right, we had many conversations about that. I remember that very well.
Well, I think you're in an interesting position that's not unique, because I see that with, Rhonda Wardlaw with the city certainly was too, where, something happens or the decision is made, and that no matter what decision it's going to be, it's a 50-50 shot that, if it's A, people are going to be furious, and if it's B, people are going to be furious. And, in your mind, you can look at this and go, all right, not how do I spin this, but how do I present this in a way, and you're in a no-win position. And I think about this like whenever there's a late opening or a snow day, or there's not a snow day, and
you're not the only one that thinks about it.
No, but as soon as there is, I go to the AACPS Facebook page, because that's where the party starts, and right there, that's when people are like, thank you, Bob, you're the best, or what the hell are you people thinking, or you'll think about the teachers, and
we've often thought about offering popcorn to people who read that page.
Oh my God, it's the best. I go there no matter what, and just to watch the parents and the staff go at it.
And it's funny how all that has evolved. And, somebody said to me one time, how do you try to please all these people with a snow decision? And I just say, really honestly, we don't. Yeah. I mean, we don't. We have to take the information we have and make the best decision we can for 82,000 kids and 10,000 employees. And so that, for you who may live in one part of the county, may be far different than for you who lives in a different part of the county, right? Because we're really diverse weather.
Let's take a step back. Let's talk about how the decision. Okay, we're coming into, or actually we're.
I picture Bob just driving around at 4 a.m. going, I don't know.
Yeah, that doesn't happen. But Bob is up at 4.
I mean, how is the decision made when we've got a potential snow forecast? And I mean, these meteorologists are giving their best guess.
That's the key word.
There's no science to it. I mean, it's in Annapolis, I know, lives in this little bubble. I know Justin Burke has said, it's the most difficult thing to forecast because you've got the warm water of the bay coming up and you've got the cold from 95, and sometimes it just goes. Same thing in Baltimore when that little squall, I don't know whether it was a Dureco, came in and overturned a couple of the water taxis probably about 5 or 6 years ago.
Correct. About that.
Nobody saw it coming. All of a sudden this thing came down. It was just like, boom, there's people in the water and there's a full-on rescue. I mean, how does the school make the decision? And whether it's an earthquake, which God knows 11 years ago you wouldn't have ever thought you would have had to worry
You're
about.
100% right about that. So, first of all, it starts not just the night before, but a day or two out, right? I mean, it's not often that we get what we got just last week, which is on Friday, right? Which is no snow all week. And then Friday morning you wake up and every forecaster's hair is on fire because all of a sudden we're going to get snow. And so now we're forced to deal with the weekend, the Saturday activity piece. But that's atypical, right? So typically you get, we're looking at some kind of weather event on Tuesday night, let's just say, hypothetically. And so those conversations start probably as early as Friday about, okay, so now what do we do? And so facilities and operations has all their staging and they get all that ready. And then things really ramp up. So if we're going to get weather Tuesday night, Monday, things really start to ramp up. And we're talking to other counties about what they're seeing and what their possible plans are. We're talking to our county, Public Works, about what they are looking at. In a really severe storm, right? The Office of Emergency Management, we might have conversations with them. And then as Monday progresses, if we're dealing with, or as Tuesday progresses, if we're dealing with a Tuesday night storm. So once the snow starts to fall, right? So then you're getting into now what do your road conditions look like? So let's assume for purposes of this conversation, we haven't made a call the night before, right? That's a whole nother chapter in that book. But if we're making a call, if it's a Tuesday night storm and we're making a call on Wednesday morning, so as early as 3 o'clock in the morning, we have transportation people on the road, eyes on the road, looking at conditions on the road, temperature instruments in their hands, taking pavement temperatures, because that's a critical piece. That everybody wants to talk about how much snow falls and the temperature outside and all that kind of stuff.
No, but the buses are doing 360.
But the road temperatures, right, the road temperatures are an absolute critical piece of all of that. And so we've got that information, and there are more conversations with State Highway and the county and other jurisdictions, and by 4 o'clock or so, 4:15, a recommendation is put together for the superintendent, who ultimately makes that decision. And then if we're closing, then we have a whole messaging system.
Okay, so the superintendent is the one that actually makes the call.
Correct.
I mean, it's not done by a flunky. It goes directly to Dr. Arlotto.
Correct.
And he says that it's going there.
The rule of thumb that I always had, because we were in Annapolis, again, the Annapolis bubble, so we're not going to get anything as severe as in North and maybe even South County, but I always say if there is snow on my lawn, just the lawn, that's going to be a 2-hour delay. And if there's any snow, even a dusting on the street, it's closed, just because northern areas are going to have it worse than we do. So I can just tell, grading on a curve, if we get a dusting, it's going to.
And that's your cue to put up a funny little thing on your Facebook page showing the little dusting of snow, saying schools are canceled here in Maryland, because that's how we roll.
But the North doesn't always get it worse, right? And so that's
generally, unless it's a nor'easter.
Generally, right. But that's part of the issue in this county, right? Is that and a lot of the complaints we get, and that you'll see on Facebook,
they're the best.
And that kind of stuff is, so there's no snow at my house. Why are we 2 hours late or closed or whatever? Well, there's no snow at your house in Harwood, let's just say, but at somebody else's house in Linthicum or Brooklyn Park, there's 2 inches of snow, and at somebody else's house in Bayside Beach in Pasadena, there's 1.5 inches and there's some ice, right? And so we don't have a sectioned transportation system. We have a countywide transportation system. And with our magnet programs, right, we're taking students from Harwood.
This goes to what we were talking about on the road over here.
To the Glen Burnie Biomedical Allied Health Program, right? I mean,
because we were in the car over here, and I said, why don't we just have North County, South County? Right. That would solve it.
Right.
And we solved your problem for you right there in the car on the way over here.
We did, except if I close the Glen Burnie cluster, right? So then the student in Harwood who goes to the BEMA program at Glen Burnie doesn't go to school, right? So that works. But if I close the southern cluster and the Glen Burnie cluster is open, now what happens?
How do you get the southern student into Glen Burnie
and how do you message that so that you don't create sheer panic among 82,000s? That's apparent.
Yeah, because I think every county thinks they're unique, but when it comes to weather, I think we are pretty unique, except for Calvert County would probably be something similar.
We are.
But if you go to Montgomery County, first of all, we're in North-South County, But if you go to Montgomery County,
we're not that unique. Baltimore's that way too. I mean, they've got that Hereford zone, and I mean, they split their thing. They say, hey, the Hereford zone, I think is what it's called.
I don't know. Is there much difference in Baltimore County?
Incredibly. Up north on 83.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and we're often sort of, I mean, if you just look at today, right, we're on that rain snow line, right? I mean, so Baltimore City delayed, Baltimore County delayed, schools north of us delayed, us, Howard, Montgomery, PG. Nobody did anything. Eastern Shore all delayed.
Well, you talked about the buses and road temperatures and everything else, and a lot of times I've heard rumors it was about the walkers, the kids that are walking on sidewalks.
That's a big part of it.
So, I mean, notably, I guess it's after a large snowstorm where there's no place to put the snow but the sidewalks, and the plow trucks are coming down and whatnot. And that's how much of a factor does walkability play?
Walkability plays a very big factor. And so, first and foremost, our responsibility as a school system are school lots and driveways, right? That's what we need to do. Then we work with...
And that's contractually, for lack of a better word.
Right. We have a couple of pieces of equipment, but contractually, we contract out a lot.
But I'm just saying that's in the realm of government and public services.
Correct.
You're responsible for your property.
Right. And then Public Works, they take the roads, right? And State Highway takes the state roads and that kind of stuff. And so the message we try to get out as often as we can is it's the responsibility of homeowners to clean that sidewalk in front of their house. Now, do we go out and inspect that? No, but we have people who are, going to look at schools and they note sidewalk conditions and that kind of stuff. The big thing for us with walkability is what do the bus stops look like? So if the plow hasn't piled all the snow up on the bus stop at the corner, right, then we're in a lot better shape than if that has occurred, right? And so because we don't want children standing in the road. Right. True. That's the worst possible scenario. And so you go around and you look and you make the best decision that you can make with the information that you have. And is it a perfect system? No. Is there a perfect system? No. So you make the decision and I say jokingly, but you let the criticism begin.
Do you guys do you contract out with a meteorologist specifically for the thing, or do you just sort of pretty much follow whatever's...
We contract out with a weather service that provides us reports every 4 hours or so.
And that's specific to Anne Arundel County?
Mm-hmm. Specific to Anne Arundel County. And then we're talking to the county, right, who has their own sources of information, and State Highway and other school systems.
And then you get together in some rooms, roll some dice. And
throw a dart at the wall.
see what goes on.
So you take a lot of heat regardless because you're the... No, you do. Yeah, because you're the face of it. I mean, when I go to that page on Facebook, on cue.
That's me and my kid.
So it's always fun. It's funny to me how many people are addressing Bob specifically on the Facebook page. Do you ever read them?
I do. I do.
Oh my God, you're a masochist.
So one thing is that I don't take any of it personally, right? You can't. I mean, that's just, you would be a masochist to take it all personally.
Yeah,
right?
I would. And I do.
And so I tell people all the time, they say, well, how do you do all this? And I say, I just put my head on the pillow at the end of the day and hope that I know that I did the best I could that day, right? And I don't make the call, I just communicate the call. And I've become this face of this for whatever reason.
You gotta feel good on the days off. Thank you, Bob.
Right,
You've got T-shirts, man.
I know, I have T-shirts and all that kind. I get no royalties. Let's be very clear about that.
My kids were going on about the parody. They were just going, they thought that was hilarious. So I told them I was coming in today, and they're like, the guy who did...
that was a last-minute thing. It has sort of been rumbling around in my brain for
a while. People who don't know, we're talking about the parody on
the Adele parody 2 years ago. Yeah, and so I thought, this would be kind of interesting. And I can't sing a lick, as all of you now know. But so I said to my daughter,
I posted on Facebook, and Bob's drunk.
Yeah, I said to my daughter, who was a junior in high school at the time, and I said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" She goes, "All right, that'd be cool." And I'm like, "Oh, really?" So we did it in 10 minutes. I mean, it was not any large scale production like this, right? It was not equalizers and cables. Right. It was a cell phone and a computer with some lyrics on it, and so we did it. And it was, I mean, it really is bizarre. In 11 years, it is the single biggest misjudgment I've made about coverage of anything, because we did it and we sent it out to our parents, and I just thought, well, this will be, because we had like 3 days of snow in a row, remember? Right. And it was, and I thought, well, this will just be funny for our parents. And then all of a sudden, Channel 7's on the phone, and the Washington Post is on the phone, and CNN's putting something on their website, and I'm like, really?
Well, you should have seen that coming, because you see the videos every summer. Usually there's like a headmaster of a boarding school does some sort of a rap. Yeah, we ain't going to school today. Yeah. So
I mean,
that was the worst rap ever.
That's what I say. It just, I just didn't. And then so my daughter was, this is really cool because she's talking to the Washington Post. I'm like, it's not all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, I was going to say
talking to the Washington Post.
That wears thin, just ask Trump.
It was just, so then that spawned all this other stuff. But I tell you, the T-shirts are cool because the proceeds from them help send students from the Center of Applied Technology South to the Skills USA competition.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's really cool.
Absolutely.
And that was all Cat South's idea. They did it. They called and said, do you care if we do this? I'm like, no, go right ahead. Look, if you can help kids, go ahead.
With the exception of Sean Spicer, maybe, I've never seen a spokesperson who is as well known by the constituency as you are, to be honest with you.
It's bizarre. I mean,
not just because of that, but because you are...
sometimes, and it's just strange.
Your voice, that when my kids hear your voice, when they hear hello parents, that is it right there. That's just the excitement. Because when we were kids, I grew up listening to WMAL because you had to sit there and listen to your school be
or watching the TV scroll.
Right.
And Arundel is so difficult to watch that because it's like the first of the alphabet.
Right.
You have no idea. It's like W.
Yeah, you're at Garrett, right?
That's Baltimore. What the hell?
But if all of a sudden my cell phone blows up, my email goes, and our house phone goes all at the same time, like, it's Bob. What's Bob up to right today? And
it's funny is that for the most part, unless there's something very critical going on in the county, you're faceless.
Right. That's right.
I mean, you're the
which
guy,
is good. That's probably a better thing. Actually,
you're the guy that writes the letters home.
That's it.
You're the guy that makes the phone calls. But unless there's something critical and you're seen on the news, and there have been issues that have done that. 11 years. What are your highs and your lows?
I guess I'll start with the lows. I mean, anytime we lose a student is really hard for me. And it has been hard, having my daughter's now a freshman in college. And so she's been in the system the whole time that I've been here. And that's by far the worst. It's just, to see families first and foremost, but to see teachers and students, it's just really difficult.
One thing that's so difficult to, not difficult, but a lot of people don't realize, and I certainly do, because I can remember some of my teachers, and I'm like ancient, but third grade, I remember Mrs. Akeley. Their teachers, my daughter still remembers in Mrs. Davis in Central Elementary. She talks about her often. She's subsequently retired, and there are teachers that make such an impact on students. And I know that students have the same effect on teachers as well. Because there's teachers that will come out. I mean, there's plenty of, I don't want to say anonymous students, but non-memorable students that go through the system. When you've got 84,000 students in the school system, that's expected. But there are some that really do. So, I mean, it does impact. I know that.
I mean, you form those bonds really quickly, and teachers get involved with kids, and the reverse is exactly true. And so we've had teachers pass away, and you have to send additional counselors to schools because kids are just distraught, and it's a really tough thing to watch.
My mom's on one of those teams. She's on those counseling teams.
Oh yeah, and so
if something happens, they send this team to the school to help the kids along.
So the flip side of it, the high part of it, I'll start with that, and it'll seem strange for a second, but to watch what our people do every single day, to watch these counseling teams go in and talk to students and help them through this, it's just unbelievable. And I really do wish there was a way we could show that to people, right? I mean, you can't because of all the confidentiality stuff. But I wish there was a way we could. I wish we could, and we try every day. We talk about, if you're walking through a school and you say, boy, that's really cool, the chances are it is really cool. Yeah. And so I know it and you know it, but how do these people out here know it, And so that's hard. The individual successes I guess the one that really stands out to me is the year that Annapolis High School made adequate yearly progress for the first time. Because I went there, first of all. And so at the time, I still knew a decent number of teachers there.
And for a while, Annapolis High School was the poster child for screwed up schools.
Right. And so that was in the first couple years I was here. And so I happened to be in the auditorium when Dr. Maxwell told that staff. And that was a really cool thing to see. It was just really cool.
Well, schools do an awful lot of good stuff. And I think it's a very familial atmosphere. You've got, yes, you've got the people up here in the Golden Palace on Reaver Road and headquarters.
I don't know that it's golden or
okay, so it's stained bronze. I don't know. And teachers really do play a huge part in students' life. I mean, quite literally, they're surrogate parents to many. Something that I didn't learn until not too far long ago is the number of homeless students that we have in the county. And you are responsible for educating them.
Correct. So the McKinney-Vento Act, a federal act, requires that if a student is declared homeless and meets the criteria to be declared a homeless student, that we continue to provide, any school system continues to provide educational services to that student as if they were still living in that school attendance area. So if a student goes to Annapolis Elementary, let's just pick a close school, right? And they become homeless and now they are living with an aunt in D.C., right?
Right.
We're required not only to educate that student at Annapolis Elementary, but to get them to and from school. So in that case, that most often will involve a taxi cab every day, twice a day, and to provide transportation for back to school night for mom or dad, and just as if
they were living down the road. Right.
Is there a lot of that?
Yes.
How many homeless students do you?
I think the last number I saw was a little over 1,000.
I had no idea. I never thought about that.
And so we expend a considerable amount of resources, time, money, energy, contractually mostly, to transport those students and to keep them, because the intent of McKinney-Vento is, right, that when everything else in this child's world is becoming unstable, right, the school can be a stabilizing force.
Sure. Yeah, it reminds me of the CASA. That's the Court-Appointed Special Advocate Program, which is just an amazing program where you have these children who go from foster home to foster home, and there's so much change in their lives that the volunteers at CASA, we ought to get someone in here to talk about that because it's amazing. But they are the only touch point in that child's life that's stable.
Right.
So they're the ones who talk to the teachers, they're the ones who talk to the doctors, they're the ones who know that the science fair project, which I want to talk to you about, I want those gone, but that they are there's stability in their home, in that child's life, no matter what. And I think I never thought about that in this case, when you have a child who's homeless, that you are the stability in that child's life, because it's the same teachers, it's the same facilities, it's the same people every day.
And again, this is somebody you said is living with an aunt or living with a relative or maybe living in a shelter. Do we have any children in the school district that are living in a homeless camp that are living in, and if we do, how do you?
I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised, is I guess the best way to answer that question. And so how do you know, which I think is I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that's the question you're going to ask me. So our school counselors play a critical role in this, right? Because they are, outside of classroom teachers, they are the link to families, right? And so they'll have conversations with families, and they know. And the other thing in McKinney-Vento and the other laws, FERPA and those types of things that address student confidentiality dictate is when you have a child who is homeless or free and reduced price meals or those categories, right? Only the people who need to know for purposes of that child's education should know, right? So it may be that I may be a homeless child, but only my counselor and my principal know. None of my teachers know. That may well be the case.
Right.
It may be that my teachers and my counselor and my principal know, but nobody else knows, right? And so it's a very private thing, and we deal with them on a case-by-case basis. We have a pupil personnel worker who is assigned to homeless students and tries to work with the family on residency issues and those kinds of things to make sure that transportation keeps up. And because oftentimes, so in the hypothetical scenario we were just talking about with Annapolis and DC, so the student may live with an aunt in DC for a while, and then perhaps is now with another family member in Baltimore, let's say, and so we've got to re-coordinate all that stuff.
Right. One shift speeds, drugs, heroin, huge problem all over the place. I think we were just talking before you came here. I think that the county and the state, as entities, are doing phenomenal work.
Yeah, they're doing a great job.
What they have. It's a scourge. It's a problem that has no end in sight. What is the school doing for it? And how prevalent is it in the school district?
Well, we have, thank God, not lost a student to a heroin overdose.
That's amazing.
Within schools, right?
In the physical school, or
I don't think we've lost
a student,
a current student. We have lost some former students.
Sure.
Let's be honest about it. We've been part of County Executive Shu's opioid task force since he formed it. And so we've been walking in lockstep with that. We've been working with the city on their piece, and then we have folks on the governor's, the statewide piece. Two most direct things that you see in our schools, the county, and you may know, has a program called Not My Child,
right?
Which Nancy Schrum in the Community and Constituent Services Office has put together. Really powerful program. If anybody has not seen it.
We've talked about it a number of times. We had actually a recovering addict.
I would urge anybody to go watch it. It's a panel, and it's a different, they get different folks, but it's essentially some health personnel, Wes Adams, the state's attorney, the two I've seen, a recovering addict, right? And it's just powerful, real life stories, right? It's not scripted.
Yeah, it's not bullshit. This is what I'm living.
So the other component of that is that Wes Adams and Jen Corbin from Mobile Crisis, the County Mobile Crisis Unit, go into our middle and high schools and do assemblies for kids. And that's really powerful. And it's a frank and honest discussion about how people end up here, right? How do they end up as addicts, and what that process may often start, for example, and I've heard them say in a couple of assemblies I've been, right? It may start with something as simple as a beer, which you think is no problem, right? And then it evolves, right?
And somebody says, hey, I got a joint, you want to try this?
Right, and so on and so on and so on. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is our health department, and I have to say, I can't praise them enough. Karen Siska and now Fran Phillips, who's the acting health officer now, have been true partners with us, not just in the regular health room stuff, right, the medicines and flu shots and all that kind of stuff, but in this piece. Long before it was required by the state to have Narcan in school health rooms, we had it because our health department put it there.
That was my question. So you do have...
We have it in every single health room in every single school. And so they've trained all their folks on it. We've had a couple of trainings to try to branch that out a little bit. As you know, there are Narcan trainings available to the general public, right? And you're able, if you take one of these trainings, there are certain circumstances under which you can receive, you can have Narcan to carry in your car, and legally.
Right, and you can get it without a prescription.
Right, and so should you encounter this situation and you've undergone this training, you may be able to save something.
And you've got the Good Samaritan law that protects you there. What as far as, recognition of addiction, are your teachers, are they trained in recognizing a kid that might be strung out, that may be suspected of heroin.
Yeah, student services works with counselors who then work with teachers on that kind of stuff. That's a little bit of a more difficult thing, right? Because, I mean, while there are certain things that are always warning signs, some things may not be, right?
Right, and you may be barking up the wrong tree.
Right, but
I mean, what would be the procedure if all of a sudden my kid comes in and he's got some significant warning signs that he may be using drugs, and whether it may not necessarily be heroin, it may be
sure.
anything else that's out there.
So first and foremost is if you have what you believe to be an immediate health issue, then the school nurse is the first place, right? That's out. But if you have, let's say you have a student who's not an immediate health risk, but you suspect something is up, it's much the same process as if you suspect the student is showing signs of abuse, for example. School system employees are required reporters in terms of abuse, but in terms of, I think this student, something's up here, right? Something's happened recently and this student just doesn't look right to me, or is acting strangely or whatever. That's usually a conversation with the teacher and the counselor and an assistant principal or principal, and then mom, dad.
Perhaps the parents, okay.
Yeah.
And because, again, I'll throw that back because, the teachers often know, you're spending 8 hours a day roughly with the children. You tend to know them a little bit better sometimes than most parents do.
That's amazing to me is, all the women in my family are teachers, and they are all so in tune that every year they have, it's not just 30 kids because, you have several classes.
Correct.
So they know intimately the ins and outs of hundreds of kids every year, and they know their personality quirks, and they know their patterns. They know when there's changes of patterns. Right. And I think teachers in particular are very perceptive when it comes to changes in behavior.
And not just in a single year.
Instinctively.
You make a great point there. But think about a high school career, right? Where a student is in the same building for 4 years, and so a teacher sees that student from time to time, right? Let's say they have them in their class in 9th grade, and they see him in 10th grade. And as you say, right, they know what that student's personality was in 9th grade, and maybe something's off, right? And so it may be that 9th grade teacher, who doesn't have that student in class anymore, says to a 10th grade teacher, what about Johnny?
Right.
And that may be how that conversation starts, right?
So, I think it's interesting on the school district. A lot of people don't realize that Anne Arundel County, I don't know whether all of them do, but in the middle school with the guidance counselors move with the grades.
Yeah.
So, and that's just a real formative year for the middle school years. And that's, you've got one person that you can go to, and there's 3 years where this kid can get to know this guidance counselor should they need him. And I know my kid was in the AVID program, and, he's the most successful of all 3 of my kids at this point. It's a wonderful program.
Your favorite?
Pat it on the back. But in high school, it changes a little bit differently. It goes by alphabet.
Right.
And what I was told on that was that because when you have siblings that come through, this is the same guidance counselor that may know, what a badass your kid is, Tim. Oh, yeah. And then all of a sudden, when your younger one comes up, they say, "Oh yeah, you're,"
Yeah, we got that in grade school.
And they know a little bit of the family dynamic, and you're dealing with a much more mature young adult, to be able to deal with that. And I think that's a very
and the dynamics are different at high school than they are at middle school too, right? And our school counselors at high school are doing some different things, right? There's some college prep involved. There's some that kind of stuff. There's some career path conversations. That's not necessarily happening at middle school. I can tell you at middle school, I had my daughter had the same counselor in 6th and 7th grade, and then she left and a different.
Certainly.
No, I take that back. She had the same counselor for all 3 years, and we went through a tough time when my mom passed away, and she had a tough time with that, and having that familiar face was critical for her. Absolutely.
So we've seen an influx, and we've talked about that a lot just because living here in Annapolis, we've seen the dynamics change, and there's been an influx of immigrants, especially from Central America, El Salvador in particular, and that's been over the last 10 years, because if you look at the census from 2000 to 2010, I think we quadrupled our Latino population, and in Annapolis, I'm just using that because I know the numbers. It's anywhere between 17 and maybe 23% of the population, and so going into Baltimore, you're seeing, or towards Baltimore, you're seeing the same, especially in any urbanized areas, and you're seeing in South County because there's so much agriculture there, and they tend to be agricultural workers. But that's changed the dynamic of everything.
Absolutely.
So, and for schools, it's a little difficult because you can ignore the population boom if you're in any other industry, except for the education education industry, if you want to call it that.
Right.
But because they're in your schools, and you have several layers. Like you have kids who are brought here and they don't speak English. My daughter has kids in their class that they're fresh here, they don't speak English, and they're having a tough time adjusting to the culture. But then you have the so-called dreamers, or kids who are brought here as infants and they don't know anything about El Salvador, and that they're totally Americanized and what have you. But that brings a lot of challenges, from language barriers to the whole MS-13, which is blown up and which may or may not be a problem depending on what side of the political aisle you're on. But how do you adjust to that as a school system?
So first and foremost, I mean, you're absolutely right about all the statistics. And I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but our Hispanic population has grown significantly in 10 years. The number of English language learners has grown significantly in 10 years. So that said, we have an obligation, and some folks don't realize this, and when DACA was going around and all that kind of stuff, we got all kinds of hate mail about why are we educating illegal immigrants. So immigration status is not a qualification for education. So let's make that really clear.
Your job is just to educate.
Our job is to educate the students who live in the districts that we have schools in. Right? We don't ask how they got here, when they got here, any of that kind of stuff, right? So that's federally, that's federal law lays that out.
Is there an age limit on students?
21.
Okay.
We can educate students till they're 21. So on the age piece, so the influx that we have seen over the last 10 years has done a couple of things. Let's start with the age piece. It has brought us older students, right, who sometimes aren't literate in their native language, much less literate in English.
Right.
And
people don't think about that.
Right.
And that's an important fact to
huge
know over, is the fact that it's not an equal exchange. You don't have a third grader coming in here at third grade level, and all you have to worry about is the language. You have there are adults who are coming here who are literate because they're generally coming from poor villages, and poor areas of El Salvador.
Absolutely correct.
That's important.
And so, I mean, and I'm not sure why I guess people just don't think in the reverse, right? We have children in this country who are illiterate.
Right.
And if they moved to, just pick El Salvador, they would not be literate in Spanish either. Right. And so the reverse is absolutely true.
So not only do you have to overcome the gap in the language, you have to overcome the gap in education.
Right.
So you double that up.
So we get a 16-year-old, let's just make up a hypothetical. We get a 16-year-old who tests at so a 16-year-old is usually in a 10th grader. Let's say he tests at a 6th grade level. Well, we're not putting a 16-year-old in a middle school. And so how do we assimilate that student, and how do we provide services to that student to educate that student, which we're legally obligated to do, and which is the right thing to do. So we've created at Annapolis High School a thing called the Newcomer Center, right, which is for overage students who have multiple significant barriers, may not be literate in their own language, much less English, right? And so they're getting more targeted services. So that's sort of the age piece. We can keep them till they're 21, through the year that they turn 21.
Okay.
And then they must exit our system or any system in Maryland.
And that would be no matter what grade they're in?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. We can't keep them past 21. The other piece is the resource piece, the general resource piece with this influx. So our English language acquisition teachers have an average caseload of 49 kids. I mean, you think about that, 49 students. So that's one issue, trying to tackle that issue. Another issue is trying to help the parents or relative grandparents or whatever of these students. And so that's bilingual facilitators, and we have 19 of those. So over the last 10 years, we had 1, 2, 3. So 7 of those 10 years, our school system got maintenance of effort budgets. We didn't get a penny more than the county had to give us under former County Executive Leopold. And so that takes its toll. And part of the caseload issue that you see now, our school counselor caseload is also pretty high. But part of that issue that you see now is the domino effect of maintenance of effort for 7 years. That changed under County Executive Newman in the budget that she did, and in the last 2 years, County Executive Shue has provided us with funding over and above maintenance of effort. And so we've worked really hard to establish and maintain and enhance relationships at the county level, particularly because they are the major funding source for us, and that's paying off. But it's a big ship to turn around.
What is going forward now and going forward? What is the largest challenge or challenges that you see on the horizon or that you're dealing with right now? I mean, obviously, we talked about the opioid epidemic. We talked about the growing, we'll say, non-native English-speaking students. We got homelessness and whatnot. We've heard about gangs in some of the high schools. I mean, what are the big problems looming for Anne Arundel County Public Schools?
Well, so I'd say two things. One, the achievement gap. That won't be a surprise to anyone. It is at the forefront of every single thing that we do, is to try to close those gaps where they exist. Part of the achievement gap has come about because of what we term the opportunity gap, right? Where students haven't always had those opportunities.
You know, it's funny, there's a guy named Alec Ross that's running for governor, probably not very successfully because he's just a very small candidate there, but I really
like 4 foot
his,
tall, just tiny.
His sort of platform. He was a tech guy, was in the Obama White House and went in to teach in Baltimore City schools. He went to some of the worst schools, and he said, we've got so much genius in these schools. What we don't have is the opportunity.
Right.
And, you know, you've got these kids that can do this, but they can't move on there.
And so you see things like our EEE program at our elementary schools, right, which is enhancing elementary excellence. And it's providing another content area for our students. So it's STEM in some schools, it's arts and humanities in others. Right. And we're getting these students to look at, just take STEM, for example. We have elementary school students, we have kindergarten and first grade students doing engineering experiments that they don't really know that they're doing.
Sure.
Right?
It's just fun stuff to do.
It's just fun stuff to do
at school.
But they're understanding wind propulsion and this kind of stuff. And so that's really cool to see. But that gap is, I mean, no one's going to rest until it's closed, but, you know, it's a tough thing because it has many different tentacles to it, right? And so that feeds into the second piece of what you were just saying, is part of the issue with the gaps comes in addressing what are an increasingly number of varying needs of students, whether they be social emotional needs, whether they be issues with addiction and those types of things, whether they be intimidation and bullying from folks who may be members of gangs. You know, schools are, this is no secret to anyone, schools are being called on, you said it earlier, right, to be more of mom and pop. Sure. In a lot of cases. And so...
but there's a big, you know, and I hear this often when you talk about an indictment of the education system in general, and there's always going to be people who are critics of it, and they will point to other education systems in other countries to say, well, they do it this way, and they'll look at like Scandinavia, and they'll say, look at how they do it in Norway and their educational system. You go, but Norway has a population of 5 million as a country. Right. Maryland has a population of 6 million, you know, and the United States has a population of 350 million. So when you talk about a big ship, trying to turn a big ship, it's a massive effort to adapt to changing society and changing problems and socioeconomic challenges, where countries like Denmark and Sweden and Norway don't have to deal with that. And a lot of the problems that we're talking about today aren't new.
And you can point to some high-performing countries academically that don't educate all their kids.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
Which we do. The other thing that has to happen, I think, is we have to have some kind of a mindset change, right? And we have to be open to new things as this all changes, right? And so the role of educator has changed, as we've talked about a little bit. But I'll just give you an example. And I'm not advocating this. I just give you one example.
That was your retweets are not endorsements.
That's right. That's right. Right, but so if you look at every now and then the year-round schooling thing comes up because people talk about the summer slide, right? And so over the summer, kids forget what they learned. Okay, so now we just made summer longer. And God knows I don't want to get into that discussion. But
coming up on the next podcast.
But the reason that we have the school calendar we have now is because it's built on an agrarian culture, right? Because in the summer, that's when you do all the farming, right? That's okay. Well, that's not the case anymore. And so do we have the mindset to move that around? Is the summer slide, for example, right? And I'm not the educated person, but is the summer slide important enough that we fix it by trying to address this? I don't know.
And you get pushback no matter what you do.
Oh, sure you do.
We've heard a lot of people talked about, you know, the early school days and how they're starting so early, and the studies that say should start later. And we were talking about on the way over here that saying, okay, just push it back then. What's the big deal? But then you talk about, well, you have to move 3 levels of education of students a day, and you're using the same buses, and it's a domino effect.
So look at what a 15-minute shift this year did. Right, and look at the number of complaints this year by moving 15 minutes. And so 15 minutes gets our high schools to 7:30, and so the folks that start school later and others would like us to go another hour. would like us to go to 8:30.
Right.
All right. And so what we said last year as the board was considering this is 15 minutes doesn't sound like a lot. And Montgomery County and Fairfax County, who came to our forum, said that. They said it doesn't sound like a lot, but you're putting way more cars in way more traffic, right? Or way more buses in way more traffic.
Well, the solution to that is what? About $10 million worth of buses, right?
About that.
And then another 300.
So, but I would point out to you that a couple years ago, the superintendent included in his budget, his recommended budget, an $8.1 million plan that would do exactly what Start School Later wants. And Start School Later opposed it. Because the middle school parents would have started last. And the middle school parents largely, for all the right reasons, I'm not being critical of middle school parents, but the middle school parents said, wait, we can't have our kids home until 9 o'clock, right? And depend on
I've got a job.
And depend on my 12-year-old, right, to get himself to school at 9 o'clock. And I'm not saying that plan didn't, but largely because Start School Later, which had argued for that very plan just like that, largely because of their opposition, the board took that plan out of the budget. And I mean, that's totally understandable. There's no easy solution, right? I mean, just like snow, right? There's no easy solution to start times. It's a very complex, I could show you a chart with all kinds of bus routes on it. It's not nearly as simple as it seems.
Well, plus then if you look at going back to a year-long school, like I have friends who in Arizona who do it, and they in California, and they swear by it. They said it's amazing. But again, turning that big ship is that if you ever wanted to implement that would take at least 10 years.
Of course it would.
To get people acclimated to the idea.
So I'll give you the very easiest example of it, and it's something that's not academic at all. So if you wanted to implement year-round school, you would almost certainly have to do it statewide in Maryland, right?
Right.
And here's, on a very simplistic level, here's why. Because you couldn't have Anne Arundel on a year-round schedule and Baltimore County on a traditional, let's call it, schedule, and schedule their athletic events.
Oh, true.
Just something as simple as that, right? That speaks nothing to any of the other stuff, right? But just something as simple as that.
And then you have the teachers union to contend with, and the parents who are upset, because vacation.
It's very
times,
complicated.
I saw adding 6 days to the school year, to the break did to at least the controversy it caused, and like you said, there's no small changes. I think everything you guys do is going to be huge, and then you have to deal with it.
It's okay.
Just to also, sort of as we wrap up, I wanted to put in perspective, you threw in that number, 84,000 students?
82, almost 83.
That's double the population and then some of Annapolis, just to sort of put that, of the city of Annapolis. Let's just sort of put that. So, there's an awful lot of moving parts that go into making that whole thing run, from the services that you provide and everything else.
Luckily, you have all that extra lottery money and slots money that just
good thing the casinos came in.
Sure.
Yeah.
sure we do.
Yeah. It all with education.
But you speak of the growth, so we're up over 3,000 students in the last 3 years.
Why is that? Just in change of
generation,
just
and just influx of immigrants. Yeah.
Wow. But you've canceled school for snow numerous times. You've canceled them for hurricanes.
Yep.
We had an earthquake.
We did have an earthquake. Let's not have one of those.
What's next? Wildfires, tornadoes, locusts?
Please. I don't know.
Hello, parents. There's too many locusts.
I have plenty to do.
When I grew up, we went to school when there were locusts.
My team has plenty to do.
How big is your team?
6 people. So I have an administrative assistant. I have 2 folks who deal with print and broadcast stuff. Then I have an online communications specialist and a manager of web services. Okay. And they're just awesome. I can't say enough good things.
How do you do? What's the mechanics? I know we're getting tight on time, but I'm curious. So when my cell phone and my landline and my computer all blow up simultaneously.
I'm dialing those myself. My finger gets me.
I know you get.
It's almost like Nancy Sinatra retweeted you.
Yeah, but I did.
So we have just real quick. We have a contracted. We contract with a vendor, Blackboard, and they have a system called Blackboard Connect. And so I can send out a phone call, an email, a text message, and put a tweet on all 125 of our school pages through one interface.
That's amazing.
And then we do the website separately, but that takes...
I heard someone complain the other day. They said whenever something happens, it's like, I'm overwhelmed by everything. I'm like, wouldn't you rather have that? That you're not going to miss it?
It is your argument that you didn't know about it.
I'll tell you what's funny is that we get people all the time that they say, could you just, I don't want all these emails. And I say, well, there's a little black X at the top.
Yeah.
And you could just click.
I'll tell you, okay, last thing, and this used to frustrate the hell out of me as a parent. I'm
Science
sure
fair
as
projects?
a parent. No, how many kids do you have?
One.
Okay, it didn't frustrate you. It will frustrate you.
Science fair
and everybody I talk to is the first start of the school year. Why do we have to fill out those damn forms? I'm sounding like Bernie Sanders here. You and the damn forms time and time again for the kids. Why can't there be a form that says what other kids you might have in the school district? I mean, I used to dread.
Oh, you're talking about the emergency forms?
All of that.
Oh, see, my wife handles that.
You know, and why can't they say?
Forms.
Why can't they come pre-printed and say, "Hey, here's what we have. Has it changed?"
So how long has it been since you had kids in school?
He's pretty old. It's
2 years.
Because they are pre-printed now.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah. So now we've gone from
research, Joe.
we've gone from a brand. No, it's okay.
Oh, it was
We've gone
horrible.
from-
Back to
we've
school.
gone from a blank form, right, an emergency form. You fill this out.
Right.
To an emergency verification form, which is here's what we have on file for your child. Make the changes.
Right. Who can pick them up and whatnot?
Or what's your primary phone number?
Right.
What's your because your primary phone number is the number that's going to ring when I call you at 5:30 in the morning to tell you there's no school, right? And so when you've changed, when that was a cell phone, let's just say, and now some poor guy in Texas has that phone, and I call at 5:30, it's 2:30 for him, see? And that's happened. So I can just tell you, we've called lots of people.
There you go. Bob Mosier from Anne Arundel County Public Schools pissing off people in Texas. That's.
We called the United Nations once.
Hey, Bob, thank you very much for coming
glad to
in.
be here. It's been fun.
I would love to do it again because I think there's some other things I would love to talk
Sure.
about
I'll be glad to do
down
it.
the road at some point. I think we've just really sort of scratched the surface of what
Sure.
we can with the school districts, and I appreciate your time this cold, not snowy
Not
morning.
snowy, thankfully. Good. It's awesome.
But have a wonderful holiday.
Yep.
Yeah, you guys too. I'd be glad to come back and do whatever you want.
This is awesome. All right, thanks, Bob.
Thanks.
All right, yep.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.